The rain poured relentlessly, drumming against the sleek black car as it cruised down a deserted road. Inside, Marcus Donovan sat in the back seat, staring blankly out of the tinted windows. A billionaire by all accounts, Marcus had everything money could buy: a sprawling mansion, private jets, and a business empire that spanned continents. But none of it could fill the emptiness he felt inside, the nagging sense that something was missing. Tonight, though, he wasn't thinking about his wealth. He was simply hoping to get home and put another long day behind him. Suddenly, his driver slammed on the brakes, and Marcus was jolted forward in his seat. "What the hell, Carl?" Marcus snapped, frustration seeping into his voice. Carl, his loyal chauffeur of over a decade, pointed toward the side of the road. "Sir, there's someone out there," Carl said, his voice uneasy. Marcus leaned forward, squinting. Through the rain-streaked window, his eyes locked on a small figure, standing in the downpour. A girl, no older than 8 or 9, soaked to the bone, shivering in the cold. She stood there, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if the rain was the least of her worries. "Pull over," Marcus ordered, his voice now steady with concern. Carl obeyed, and Marcus stepped out into the storm, his expensive shoes sinking into the muddy ground as he approached the girl. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, kneeling down to meet her gaze. The girl looked up at him, her wide, innocent eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. Her clothes were drenched, her hair clinging to her face, and her lips were trembling. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at him, as if trying to decide whether he was someone she could trust. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Can you help me find my mom?" she asked, her voice cracking with vulnerability. Marcus felt a pang of sympathy in his chest. It was late, it was raining, and this child was alone in the middle of nowhere. He couldn't just leave her here. "Of course," he said softly. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, shuffling her feet before answering. "Emma." "All right, Emma. Let's get you out of the rain first, okay?" Marcus reached out his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, she took it. Her tiny fingers were freezing, and Marcus couldn't shake the sense of urgency building inside him as he led her toward the car. Something about the situation gnawed at him. Why was a young girl like Emma out here all alone, with no sign of her mother or anyone else? He had a feeling there was more to this than what he was seeing on the surface. Once they were both inside the warm car, Marcus turned to Emma again. "Do you know where your mom is?" he asked gently. Emma looked down at her lap, fidgeting with the edge of her wet jacket. "No," she whispered. "She told me to wait for her, but she never came back." Marcus's heart sank. This wasn't just a case of a lost child. Something was very wrong here. "Do you remember where you last saw her?" he pressed, trying to keep his voice calm. Emma nodded slowly. "At the park. She said she'd be back soon, but it's been a long time, and I got scared," Emma said, her voice barely holding together. Marcus took a deep breath, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't leave this little girl alone to fend for herself. Whatever had happened, he would help her find her mother. It was the least he could do. "We'll figure this out, Emma," he reassured her. "But first, we need to call the police, okay?" To his surprise, Emma shook her head quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. "No, please, no police," she blurted out, her voice rising in fear. Marcus frowned, caught off guard by her reaction. "Why not? They can help find your mom," he said, trying to understand, but Emma only shook her head again, her grip tightening on the seat. "She said not to trust them. She said they wouldn't understand." Marcus froze at her words. There was more going on here than he had realized. Who was this girl's mother, and why didn't she want the police involved? His mind churned with questions, but he knew pushing too hard would only scare Emma further. "Okay," Marcus said, keeping his tone calm. "No police, but we're going to figure this out together." "All right," Emma nodded, her eyes wide and trusting. Marcus leaned back in his seat, the weight of the situation settling over him. He glanced out the window, watching the rain pour down in heavy sheets, blurring the world outside. How had he, of all people, ended up here, on a dark road with a lost girl who was clearly running from something? Just as he was about to ask another question, Emma turned to him, her voice cutting through the quiet. "Do you know my mom?" she asked suddenly, her voice small but firm. The question caught Marcus off guard. He looked at her, confused. "I don't think so," he said slowly. "Why do you ask?" Emma stared at him, her eyes searching his face. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said a name. The moment the name left her lips, Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. His heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in years, he felt truly speechless. That name, it couldn't be, but it was. Marcus's mind raced, the past rushing back to him in a flood of memories he had long tried to bury. He stared at Emma, unable to hide his shock. How do you know her?" he finally managed to ask, his voice shaky. Emma looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "She's my mom," she said softly, and in that instant, Marcus's world shifted. The rain outside, the warmth of the car, everything faded into the background. All he could hear was the echo of that name in his mind, over and over again. Her mother was someone he thought he'd never see again, someone who had changed his life forever. Marcus could hardly breathe. The name Emma had said echoed in his mind, stirring memories he had tried to forget for years. The weight of it settled heavily in his chest, and he stared at the girl, unable to form a response. How could this little girl be connected to her? He turned his gaze back to the road. Ahead, his thoughts racing. Years ago, Marcus had met someone, a woman who had completely upended his life. They had shared a fleeting, intense connection, but circumstances had torn them apart. He had always wondered what had happened to her after they went their separate ways, but he never imagined their paths would cross again like this. Now, here was Emma, her child, her daughter. Marcus clenched his fists, trying to focus. He needed to understand how this all connected, but more than that, he needed to figure out why Emma's mother hadn't come back for her. "Emma," he began, his voice softer now, trying to tread carefully. "What's your mom's name?" The girl hesitated, clearly sensing the weight of his question. She looked down at her hands, wringing them together. Finally, she whispered the name again, but this time, Marcus heard it loud and clear. "Lila. Lila." It felt like a punch to the gut, hearing her name spoken after so many years. Marcus tried to remain calm, but a storm of emotions surged within him. Shock, confusion, and something else, something he wasn't ready to name. He had to stay focused on helping Emma. Whatever had happened, it wasn't her fault. She was just a kid, and she was scared. "Emma," Marcus said gently, "I knew your mom a long time ago, but I haven't seen her in years. Do you know why she told you not to go to the police?" Emma's eyes filled with uncertainty, and she looked away, as if trying to remember something important. "She said there were people after us, bad people. That's why we had to leave. And why she left me at the park." Marcus's heart tightened. Bad people. His mind flashed back to his time with Lila. They had been in different worlds. He, the up-and-coming businessman, with a spotless image, and she, always skirting the edge of trouble. He had never fully understood what she was running from, but now it seemed like her past had caught up to her. And Emma was stuck in the middle of it. What kind of people? Marcus asked, his voice steady, despite the dread creeping in. I don't know, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't tell me much, just that they were dangerous, and we had to stay hidden. Marcus leaned back, piecing it together. If Lila was in danger, then Emma might be too. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. He couldn't just sit back and hope everything would work itself out. He needed to protect Emma, but he also needed answers. Fast. Okay, Emma, I promise we'll keep you safe, but I need to find your mom, Marcus said, his voice firm with resolve. Do you remember anything else? Anything at all that could help? Emma shook her head, biting her lip nervously. She said she'd come back, but she didn't, she whispered, her voice cracking with fear. What if something happened to her? Marcus swallowed hard. He didn't want to entertain that possibility, but the thought gnawed at him. Lila had been reckless, but she loved her daughter. That much he was certain of. If she hadn't returned, something was definitely wrong. Suddenly his phone buzzed. Marcus glanced down at the screen and saw an unknown number flashing. He hesitated before answering, something inside him telling him this call was important. Hello, he said, his voice guarded. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a voice he hadn't heard in years. It was Lila. Marcus! Her voice was shaky, filled with desperation. Is Emma with you? Marcus's heart raced, his grip tightening on the phone. Lila, where are you? What's going on? He demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. I can't explain right now. Just, please, Marcus, you have to protect her. They're coming for me, and if they find Emma, it's over. Who's coming, Lila? Marcus asked urgently, but the line was already cutting out. Please, take care of her. Lila's voice faded into static before the call dropped entirely. Who was that? Emma asked, her eyes wide with worry. Marcus forced a reassuring smile. It was your mom. She's okay, but she's in trouble. I'm going to help her, and I'm going to keep you safe. I promise. Emma nodded, though her eyes were still filled with fear. Marcus knew he had to act fast. Whoever was after Lila could come for Emma next, and he couldn't let that happen. He made a quick decision. They couldn't stay in one place. He had to get Emma somewhere safe, away from prying eyes, while he figured out the next step. Carl? Marcus called to his driver. We need to head back to the city. Take the long route. Avoid the main roads. Yes, sir, Carl replied, understanding the urgency in Marcus's tone. The car began moving again, and Marcus settled back into his seat, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. He needed to find Lila before it was too late, but he also needed to keep Emma out of harm's way. The clock was ticking, and the walls were closing in. Whoever these people were, they were dangerous, and they wouldn't stop until they found what they were looking for. As the car sped through the rain-soaked streets, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change once again. This time, in ways he could never have predicted. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt Emma, no matter what it took. And as they drove deeper into the night, Marcus knew the storm had only just begun. As the city lights blurred past the windows, Marcus couldn't shake the tension in his chest. Every mile they traveled felt like a countdown. He glanced over at Emma, who was silently staring out of the window, her small hands clutching the seatbelt nervously. The rain had started again, heavier this time, matching the pounding of his heart. They drove in silence for a while until Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text. He picked up the phone and saw a single message flash across the screen. They know. His heart skipped a beat. He didn't know who had sent it or how they had gotten his number, but the message was clear enough. They weren't safe. Not yet. Marcus's mind raced. He needed a plan, and fast. If they knew, it was only a matter of time before they caught up with him. He couldn't risk staying on the move forever. He had to find Lila and figure out what was going on before it was too late. As the car wound through the back streets, Marcus came to a sudden decision. He grabbed his phone and called an old contact, someone he hadn't spoken to in years, but trusted with his life. After a few rings, a deep, gruff voice answered. "Marcus, it's been a while. John, I need a favor," Marcus said, skipping the pleasantries. "It's urgent." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then John's voice came through, serious now. "What kind of trouble are you in?" Marcus glanced at Emma, making sure she wasn't listening too closely. "It's complicated. I've got a little girl with me. Her mother's in trouble. We need a safe place to lay low for a while." John sighed. "You always did find yourself in the middle of something. I'll send you a location. Be there in 20 minutes. "Thanks, John." "I owe you," Marcus said before ending the call. As promised, a message with coordinates popped up on his screen. Marcus relayed the location to Carl, who immediately adjusted their course. The rain had started to let up by the time they reached their destination, an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It didn't look like much from the outside, but Marcus knew it was secure. John had once used it as a safe house back in the day. "Stay close," Marcus told Emma as they got out of the car. She nodded, holding tightly to his hand. Inside the warehouse, they were met by John, a tall, imposing man with a weathered face. He gave Marcus a brief nod before looking down at Emma. "This the kid?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "Emma, this is John. He's going to help us." Emma gave a small wave, clearly unsure, but trusting Marcus's judgment. John led them deeper into the warehouse, past a series of security doors that locked behind them. "You'll be safe here for now," he said, motioning to a small room. "No one will find you unless you want them to." Marcus thanked him, feeling a small sense of relief. At least for the moment, Emma was out of harm's way, but his mind was still racing. Lila's voice echoed in his head, her cryptic warning lingering like a dark cloud. He couldn't just sit here and wait for something to happen. He needed to act. "John, I need to find Lila," Marcus said. "She's in serious trouble, and I think it's connected to something from her past. Do you know anyone who might be able to help?" John frowned, thinking for a moment. "I know a few people who could dig up some information. But Marcus, if she's mixed up with dangerous people, you need to be careful. This isn't your world anymore." "I don't care," Marcus said firmly. "I owe it to her, and to Emma." John sighed, but nodded. "All right, I'll make some calls." As John walked away, Marcus sat down next to Emma. "How are you doing, kiddo?" he asked softly. Emma looked up at him, her big eyes filled with worry. "I just want my mom back." Marcus's chest tightened. He didn't know if he could make that promise, but he would do everything in his power to bring Lila back to her daughter. Hours passed, and Marcus paced the room, his phone silent. Just as he was beginning to lose hope, John returned with a grim look on his face. "We found her," John said, his voice heavy. "But she's in deeper than I thought. She's being held by some people who want something from her. Something she stole." Marcus's heart sank. "Where is she?" John handed him a slip of paper with an address scribbled on it. "But Marcus, these people don't play games. If you go after her, you need to be ready for a fight." Marcus nodded, his mind already made up. "I'll handle it." The drive to the location was tense. Marcus could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him. The danger, the uncertainty, the responsibility to protect Emma. He couldn't afford to fail. When they finally arrived, Marcus slipped inside the building, keeping to the shadows. It didn't take long to find Lila. She was tied to a chair, bruised but alive. Her eyes widened when she saw Marcus. "You came," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. "Of course I did," Marcus said, rushing to untie her. But before he could finish, the door burst open, and a group of men stormed in, guns raised. For a split second, everything froze. Then chaos erupted. Marcus moved quickly, shielding Lila as shots rang out. It was a blur of adrenaline and fear, but somehow he managed to get Lila out of there, both of them battered but alive. In the safety of the warehouse, Lila held Emma tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted this for you." Emma hugged her mother, the fear slowly fading from her eyes. "I'm just glad you're okay." Marcus watched the reunion with a heavy heart. He had done what he set out to do. He had reunited them, but something inside him had changed. This wasn't just about old memories or past mistakes anymore. It was about the future, about Emma's safety and giving her a chance at a normal life. As the rain finally stopped outside, Marcus knew one thing for sure. No matter what, he would be there for them, ready to protect them from whatever came next.